Very happy to welcome back Alexandra Hudson. Her book has been released. It's called The Soul of Civility, Timeless Principles to Heal Our Society and Ourselves. It launched, a week or two ago? And
1 week today, exactly.
wow, 1 week and a day. Yeah, and it is a fantastic book. And I just want to let listeners know, people are like, oh, civility. That's the problem with politics. Everybody's too nice to each other. We need to be tough. We need to be just not worry about being polite all the time. But one thing near the very beginning of your book you talk about is the difference between just being polite, just kind of going along to get along, and being civil. They're very different things. And so could you explain that as we begin?
That's exactly right. Today, there are two contingents that often one says we need more civility and politeness. And there's this whole growing faction that wants to revive this bygone era of decency and civility in public life, and they say we need more civility and politeness. And there's this other
Mm-hmm.
contingent that comprises actually both the left and the right. Then they say
Mm-hmm.
no, civility is part of the problem. The last thing we
Mm-hmm.
need is just efforts to talk nicely. And especially we see this on the left, where people say, no, civility and politeness, they're part of the problem. They're tools of the people in positions of power to keep the powerless in
Mm-hmm.
positions of powerlessness. And the problem that both these contingents make, though both the ones that want more civility and politeness, the ones that want less, they conflate these two ideas, and they're absolutely essential to disambiguate and I learned this firsthand in government, this essential distinction when I served
Mm-hmm.
with Secretary DeVos at the Department of Education, that civility is a disposition of the heart. It's a way of seeing others as our moral equals who are worthy of respect in light of our shared moral status as members of the human community. Politeness is etiquette, it's technique, it's manners, it's behavior. But actually, respecting someone requires at times being impolite. Civility at times
Mm-hmm.
requires telling hard truths, engaging in robust debate, telling your wife that you don't think that is the most flattering dress on her. Like that's the way to actually
Uh,
love and respect someone, telling someone
that's that's
they,
that's in the advanced courses. That will be, yeah,
there you
that's like
go.
a 400 level class.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a very important distinction to make because it's not about just being a wallflower, being a pushover, anything like that. It's actually more effective to get the job done that you want done. Frankly, I see people shouting and screaming in the streets. I don't know what they're protesting. I don't care what they're protesting. I turn the channel. I hit the gas in my car to get out of that area. I don't care because it's like these people have nothing to teach me. They have nothing to show me, and I might completely agree with them, and it doesn't matter. It's like, I don't want to be associated with those guys. They look like crazy people. So I think that's an important point to put in there. And it isn't just simple politeness, as you mentioned. And you start off talking about the book, Dealing in Washington, with, the smiling face with a stiletto hiding behind their back. It's that type of kind of treacly, um, I don't know. It's just, hey, let's see what I can get out of this person and then throw them away the next day. Civility is a lot more important. And as you say, it's understanding who you are as a person and who the other person is as a person. And you kind of touch on, this isn't a Christian book, quote unquote, but you kind of touch on all the different wisdom literature, your perspective as Christian, and something being now, kind of this convert to the Orthodox world. They always say everybody you meet is an icon of Christ. An icon just means image. So you see a homeless person begging on the corner, like it or not, that's Jesus right there. And
Mhm.
it could be your grumpy boss, it could be anybody, but just kind of trying to readjust your mindset. Not only is it important, you don't just do it because, well, God told me to, so I better do it. It makes your life better. You're not as angry and surly, and you can actually engage with people and maybe even change someone's mind.
It's a great point that civility is both an inherent good
Mhm.
and an instrumental good, as I argue in my book.
Mhm.
So again, civility is different from mere politeness. Politeness is etiquette, manners, it's technique, it's behavior, it's
Mhm.
external. Civility is an internal disposition of the heart that sees others as our moral equals. And that seeing others as our moral equals who are worthy of respect is in and of itself good. It's an inherent good because as you like the imago Dei, this concept of
Mhm.
man, humankind, man and woman, Genesis 1:27, being created in God's image. That is the moral foundation for this philosophy of civility that I unpack in my entire book. And that is inherently good to see ourselves and others as worthy of respect, as bearing the imprint of the divine. That is what Christ said, that what you do
Mhm.
to the least of these, you do unto me, that to see that image of Christ, that image of the divine in every single person in and of itself good. However, it is also civility an instrumental good. That civility both demands action at times while also taking off certain action off the table. So for example,
Mhm.
it might demand in one context, telling your wife that she has food in her teeth or something of that ilk, right? But it might
Mhm.
also demand protest and a sit-in. And I reclaim the whole tradition of civil disobedience in this conception of civility. I mean, our country, America, was founded on civil protest. That the Boston Tea Party was anything but polite, but
Mhm.
it was a
Right.
protest. It was Americans conceiving their duty of citizenship and their commitment to ideals of the rule of law, equal treatment under the law, as being as a higher commitment than their duty to King George. And so that is
Mhm.
what informed the American Revolution, right? That's that foundational. So again, civility demands action at times. And it also takes action off the table. I love Dr. King's nonviolent, peaceful resistance as a model for this because he first ensured every single person underwent this process of purification, cultivating love,
Mhm.
respect, affection for the white supremacists that they were protesting. And it
Mhm.
was only after they cultivated that disposition, that way of seeing others as bearing the imprint of the divine, that they were allowed, that informed their protest. And it took action off the table. They weren't violent. They could not, in good conscience, violate the dignity of the people they were protesting or their property rights while they were protesting against an injustice and an unjust system that violated the dignity and subjected certain human beings over others. So and we see that in the abolitionist movement as well. Frederick Douglass, William Lloyd Garrison, they were pacifistic because they knew that there was a hypocrisy. How could they claim to be for human equality and pro-human dignity if they were willing to violate the dignity of slaveholders? They
Mhm.
saw that an inherent contradiction, and that's what informed their pacifism. So civility, inherent good, instrumental good as well, and it both demands action, actually respecting others, and civility, and it both takes action off the table as well, harming others.
Right. Yeah. And the thing too is something that people don't really appreciate while they're owning the libs or owning the cons or owning whoever online. It makes the person doing it so flippin' miserable.
Mhm.
Shockingly, I'm imperfect and I don't like to admit that.
I
Few
don't
people
believe it.
know.
I don't believe
Yes,
it.
breaking news. But I don't know, probably 5, 10 years ago when I'd be on social media, I'd be one of those guys arguing and yelling, and someone would insult me and I would insult them with something harsher. And it does that make you happy? No, it makes you miserable. And just using some basic civility online, not worrying about what people think about you in the first place, turning any kind of an insult, I usually just amplify it. You're out of touch, old man. And I'm like, come on, I'm only 97, just kind of playing into it. And
Do it. Laugh at
people,
it.
and
Yeah.
then, yeah, and it's like, it kind of shows that their insults don't affect me. And instead of just churning more toxicity into that, sewer pipe, you're just kind of relaxed with it. Sometimes I'll compliment them when they insult me and they just don't know. It's like category error. I don't know what to do, but it just makes your life so much better instead of these poor people who wake up at 10 a.m. on Saturday and start tapping the keys and they're still there at 10 p.m., just bitter and angry and
Yeah.
yelling at people. And I'm like, what kind of a life is this? The sun is out outside. Why are you doing this to yourself, let alone how you're treating other people?
It is such a profound point, and there are several layers of profundity to what you just shared, John. You know,
As is very common with my statements, I
that's
might
right.
mention. The
That's
non-humble person would say that.
layered, complex, nuance, all attributes that you always
Yeah,
possess.
yeah.
But that people, it's a cliche that hurt people. But
Mhm,
often we don't understand that the kindest thing that we can do for ourselves is to be kind to others. And
mhm,
the meanest thing, like it's a form of self-sabotage to act out and lash out towards someone else because we feel ugly. Like we're inherently interconnected as a species. And this goes back to Socrates, Dr. King, and many other thoughtful people in between. This is Newton said that if I've seen further, it's because I'm standing on the backs of giants. And that's how I feel. Like
mhm,
I wrote this book, The Soul of Civility, in the presence of eternity and eternal ideas that have stood the test of time for a reason, because these are the ideas that I think can see us through this deeply divided moment. And what both, Socrates, Dr. King, and others have said is that virtue is good for its own sake, right? So civility, treating others with decency and kindness for its own sake, is its own reward. Whereas
mhm,
cruelty to others, viciousness, that is its own punishment. It's sickness of the soul. Dr. King says this about segregation, that
mhm,
segregation hurts the soul of the person segregated and the segregator. It's
mhm,
mutually deforming of the human spirit. And we don't realize that. We often insufficiently appreciate that when we are cruel to others, we are hurting ourselves, just as much. And that it's an act of loving ourselves too, to be willing to offend others, to stand up for
mhm,
ourselves, to say no. There's an incredible amount of social pressure that we don't appreciate against offending others, and against wanting to against saying no to people. Like there's a lot of pressure
mhm.
that often we're busy people, you and me, John, your listeners, I'm sure, that we often find ourselves overcommitted, right? Why? And we resent
Right.
ourselves, right?
Mhm,
That's self-sabotage, and we resent other people that invite us into things. But why do we do that? Because we have an insufficiently clear sense of who we are, what we want, but like recognizing that it's a form of loving and respecting ourselves and
mhm.
others to say no. That's a
Yeah.
reciprocal duty to civility, to say I respect myself enough, and I'm self-aware enough to say I'm going to decline graciously, but it's a
Mhm,
respectful way to respect others too, so we're not overcommitting ourselves and resenting people. Like it's so easy to walk around just resenting people for all these impositions on our time that we could easily avoid if we just said no. But we're very
mhm.
uncomfortable with saying no because we don't want to hurt people's feelings.
Right, right, exactly, and that's kind of the difference between politeness and civility, is one
Yes.
is authentic and one's kind of a
Yes.
surfacey thing to go along to
Exactly.
get along, kind of. And you see that all the time in politics, especially, and we talk a lot of politics on the show, of course, but you see people being kind of treacly, over the top, polite to people, and it's just like kind of makes your skin crawl. And then you have the other people who are just angry for the sake of being angry. Everything makes them upset. They have no solutions to anything. They complain about what's wrong, and never do anything to improve things. And it kind of reminds me, just because the first president I really could follow, too young to vote for him, but Reagan. Um, One thing, living in Arizona, loved my Barry Goldwater and loved my Reagan. But one thing that I noticed even early on, even in high school, is Goldwater was famous for being against things, and Reagan was famous for being for things. And I just think people who are for things, and they can be the exact same thing. A guy can say, I hate commies, or I love freedom, and it's just kind of this perspective shift. It's just like, focus on what we can do to actually improve things, because this world is full of whiners. They're all full up. We don't need any more. They don't really contribute a lot, and they just bring everybody down. And it's like, if we could be directed to something positive that we can accomplish, it seems like that would be popular for votes. I don't know. Maybe just me.
Well, it's kind of, it gets to this tension, this inherent tension in my project where I'm trying to sell a vision of human flourishing and really a philosophy of life
Hmm.
that offers a vision of the good life in community. So my theory of
Hmm.
human nature is that we're profoundly social as a species. We thrive, we become fully human in relationship with others, but we're also morally and biologically defined by self-love. And that
Hmm.
those two things are in tension. Our love of others and love of self are often in tension. And that when we, and that is what, and that has always been the case from the dawn
Yeah.
of, our species through to today. So many ways,
Hmm.
our challenge with civility is timeless. It's not a new challenge. And yet we live, so I'm, part of my argument is that it's worth the sacrifice to surrender the self, the ego, so our social natures can flourish and thrive. That's
Hmm.
a sacrifice that is worthwhile, and that we each have a role to play in seeing our democracy, civilization itself, endure and survive and thrive, that it's
Hmm.
worth it. And it's an inherently positive vision of the good that I'm trying to sell and get people
Hmm.
excited about in an era where the incendiary and the hate clicks are seemed, to what prevail
Right,
often.
right.
So I'm kind of captive to the subject matter I'm trying to share with others, but at the same time trying to compete in a market where the opposite is what
Mhm.
seems to be rewarded. So it is a tension of our moment, and that's one way in which our moment is unique. Our human nature doesn't change; much is the same. That this problem that we are dealing with now, this challenge to incivility, is timeless because of our social and selfish natures. And yet, social media, the ubiquity of our news cycle, the fact that we're affected by what's going around the world. At every moment of every day, if we allow ourselves to be, that's new,
Mhm.
and that's a difficult challenge that we need to navigate together, that I think the wisdom of the past can help guide.
Yeah, and I've said this before, I know, but it's like there's a lot of intelligence. Intelligence is almost a dime a dozen these days. There's not a whole lot of wisdom. And
Mm.
that's one good thing about this book is it taps into wisdom going back to Egyptian leaders. I can't pronounce his name.
Patotep,
Of
yes.
course, I was about to pronounce it perfectly like that.
Yes,
But
exactly.
going way back, when you look through it, and I know I've done this on other things about writing about people who just get outraged at everything and angry about everything. Every single culture, throughout history around the world, every religion, every philosophy is just like, would you stop doing this to yourself? And yeah, it hurts your neighbor, it hurts the community. You end up doing terrible things like violence and stuff, but also it just makes you so miserable. And something I've seen too in the whole world, whether it's blogging in the old days or political commentary now, there's people who I label part of the outrage industrial complex.
Right.
They're like, "Ooh, I get more clicks if I get everybody amped up and outraged about things." Those people don't last. They're lucky if they last 18 months, and sometimes you'll see these personalities get popular out of nowhere, and then a couple years later you're like, "What happened to that person? They were like on the make and they're just like, I can't do this anymore. It's just I'm miserable, I'm nervous all the time, I can't sleep.
Yes.
I hate my life because it just makes that's the thing is, yes, we need to focus on all these lofty goals, but it makes you miserable. Don't don't waste your life like that just being angry at people. Actually be calm and relaxed, and you end up actually helping yourself, but helping a lot of other people too.
This is exactly what Socrates would add to this conversation of incivility versus civility now. Like we live in this era where people say, the stakes are just too high. People on the political
Hmm.
left and right at this,
Hmm.
we need to be willing to pull out all the stops, all bets are off in order to win, or in order to win.
Hmm.
Whatever it is we're trying to win at. Passing this bill or winning this election, and so the stakes are too high. And the other side is too bad to respect
Hmm.
them, right? Too morally bad. And what Socrates would say again, and Dr. King said this as well, that treating the other side with decency and respect, like that is its own reward, and that people who are unwilling to do that, and this is kind of a timeless question, that how can good people succeed in a world full of evil, right? Like this
Right,
question of how
right.
to be civil in a world full of incivility is a variation on that question. How
Hmm.
do we how can good people survive in a world full of people who are willing to do and say anything to get ahead? Machiavelli said you can't. The people who are willing
Mhm.
to dispense with the rules of decency and being bound by morality, they're always going to win. And Socrates and
Mhm.
Dr. King would say, no, those people, they've actually already lost, right? That the
Mhm.
cost has been has been their own soul. That they haven't
Yeah.
actually, they don't deserve our contempt. They deserve our
Mhm.
compassion because
Mhm.
they have acted in ways that have permanently, degraded their own humanity, their own personhood, and degrading the personhood and humanity of others through their viciousness, through their duplicitousness. And I that's definitely the approach I take in the book, that also we can't control others. We can
Right.
only control ourselves and how we choose to conduct
Mhm.
ourselves. And at the end of the day, we're accountable to ourselves. We have to sleep with ourselves at night, like that it's our
Yeah.
souls. If we have trouble sleeping,
Mhm.
it's our souls that we're going to be stuck with. And that even if we put a front out to the world of being virtuous and kind, like, we know, we know
Mhm.
what we've done. And at the end of the day, that's going to haunt us. And that's its own
Mhm.
punishment, Socrates and Dr. King would say.
Yeah, and a lot of this too is really Stoicism 101 as well. And it gets a bad rap as like being unemotional and uncaring. I cop to being both of those things. However, just in reading about it, it's all about, okay, what's under my control? What isn't under my control? The jerk who cuts in front of me in line at the grocery store, that isn't under my control. And I can either let it bug me the rest of the day, or I can live life and enjoy myself and enjoy the nachos that I'm going to make with the groceries I'm buying. So yeah, just by focusing on the stuff that matters and not being so worried about that person said something mean to me. After a while of just practicing civility, some people will say, "Oh, wow, you have a thick skin that these criticisms don't bother you." It's like, no, I don't, because I think a thick skin is bad. It just makes you kind of calloused and mean in a different way. But after practicing this, you're like, wow, those criticisms have no negative effect on me. I don't know these people and I wish them well. And yes, I disagree with them, but it's not about deflecting criticism or something like that. It's just like you finally understand, and maybe it comes with age too. It's just like none of these critiques or insults or anything like that have any negative effect. I'm still here. I don't have a broken arm now because somebody said something mean. So let's just focus on changing minds and doing some good.
And that's a great point, that a root cause of so much incivility in our world is people having an insufficiently high view of the gift of
Mhm,
being human, both in their own lives
mhm,
and in others. Like, the reason that we see people getting really upset and vicious, in
mhm,
response to an attack, or even seeing malicious intent where it wasn't intended, right? Like, people kind of reading into the meaning behind a tweet or an email or something that
mhm,
someone said, is because that is exacerbating a core sense of deficiency that they feel in
mhm,
themselves, right? It exacerbates that. And then, like a vicious animal, we lash out and attack. Like, we feel under attack, so we attack
right.
and like, and because we feel like our humanity's been diminished, we respond in kind, diminish the humanity of others. And so that's why a root cause, a core solution, and a core purpose of my book, The Soul of
Mhm,
Civility: Timeless Principles to Heal Society and Ourselves, is to recover this high view of the gift of humanity, and to recover
mhm,
the gift of personhood, the gift of being human in both ourselves and others. In many ways, my book is this humanist manifesto that I hope
mhm,
helps us appreciate the basic dignity and worth and beauty of all human beings, not just those who are like us, not just those who agree with us or who can do anything for us in return. Like, those, under those circumstances, that's when it's easy to be nice to people, right? When they can
yeah,
repay us, they're
yeah,
like it. But the test of true civility is how we treat those, that cannot do anything for us in return, that aren't like us, that don't agree with us.
mhm,
Um, and that's when character matters. Character matters in the places where uh, it's called what Lord Moulton called the obedience to the unenforceable. It's when
mhm,
there's no positive law to enforce on us, how we ought to act, and we choose to act graciously. A free society, a democracy, depends on us choosing to act with grace and courtesy and decency to our fellow citizens if we do not want to live in a police state, which I don't think any of us do.
Well, yeah, yeah. Manners are going to come, and you want to be the one who enforces them on yourself, not
That's
have
right.
somebody else have to enforce them on you. One last question. We've kind of covered this and touched on it, but people will respond with statements like this. Hey, we need to be civil. Hey, we need to raise above it. It's like, yeah, but our society is going to hell. It's like, that guy's a jerk, and nobody's going to listen to me if I'm meek and mild. But it just seems the opposite with me. Is if everybody's screaming at each other and one woman is talking with a quiet voice, everybody quiets down so they can listen to what this person is saying. It's like, you want to stand out, and the only way to stand out in our current, especially in politics, but our current civic culture, is to be calm, because people are craving that, and nobody is offering that now. And that's one thing I really appreciate about your book and your messaging with your website and all that.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate that. A big part of my message is that it's so easy to look at, what's happening in the Middle East, to what's happening in Washington, and feel overwhelmed and frustrated and just despair at
Hmm.
the evil and divisiveness and violence in our world, and not knowing what we can do to
Hmm.
make a solution. And one thing I learned when I felt similarly when I left Washington, D.C. 2017, 2018, and moved to Indianapolis. And one of my first friends here, her name was Joanna Taft, and she came up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Joanna. Would you like to porch with us sometime?" This was after church one day. And I never heard
Right.
the word porch used as
Yeah.
a verb before, but she invited
Hmm.
us to her home that evening, and I realized that she's staging this subversive, quiet revolution of
Hmm.
porching from her front porch against our atomized, divided, dehumanizing status quo. She curated people across race, across politics, across geography, and said, I'm just going to create this shared space so people can build trust and build friendships, and that is what's going to heal our broken world. Individuals choosing, whether or not they have a front porch, just choosing to open up what they do have, their
Hmm.
homes, their living rooms, holding court in a coffee shop. You don't have to have a porch to live your life according to that logic of wanting your life to be this and the space that you have to be an oasis of healing. And I believe that will change the world, that we can't change what's happening on the other side of the world or what other people are doing, but we can change ourselves. And if enough of us choose to reclaim the soul of civility, we can, I believe, maybe change the world.
Absolutely. Could not have said it better. The author is Alexandra Hudson, The Soul of Civility, Timeless Principles to Heal Our Societies and Ourselves. Buy it, rush out now in a buying frenzy. And where
Right.
else can people follow your work? So you have a great website and Twitter presence and all that good stuff.
Thank you. Please feel free to join us over at Civic Renaissance, civic-renaissance.com, and where I am passionate about storytelling and infusing beauty, goodness, and truth into our world and public discourse. And I do have a gift package, $700 in free gifts that you can claim at the website, at my website,
Mhm.
alexandraohudson.com, for as a thank you for buying the book. So thanks in advance for considering buying the book as well.
Great, great. Yeah, everybody, please read it. Thanks so much for being on. All the links are in the show notes, so everybody check it out.
Thanks so much, Josh.
Ricochet. Join the conversation.